It's been more than 2 months since Tears of the Kingdom was released, and I'm still in awe of just how much of an amazing game it is. My expectations for it were through the roof, given how much fun I had while playing Breath of the Wild, but even when the bars were set exceedingly high, it was still able to blow me away. It was the same Hyrule as before, but everything felt like I was experiencing it for the first time again. Not only were there new things to explore on the base map, but the additions of the sky map and the depths made it feel like a completely different world altogether. And you can travel through it all with all sorts of contraptions through the Ultra Hand ability. It was amazing how alive this game felt to me, and even after playing it almost every single day since release, I still feel like I've only scratched the surface. But the exploration and gameplay mechanics weren't the only thing that stuck with me, even though it is stupidly fun to make horribly designed mechs and launching NPCs into the air by trapping them into boxes. No, what still had me in its clutches is Tears of the Kingdom's story, a very specific portion of it. You can probably already tell by the title of this video, but I will be discussing heavy spoilers from this point onward, so if you haven't finished or have no idea what I'm referring to by the title, then please enjoy the game and come back, as this element to the story is something that's best to experience and figure out on your own. Now, as much as I love Breath of the Wild, its story wasn't all that jaw-dropping, and that's completely fine. With how chock-full it was with its exploration and side content, I can excuse it for having a simple and straightforward story. And just to be clear, not everything needs to have a super intricate story. In fact, I thought the traditional solve all the main dungeons and tackle the main boss storyline was charming in its own way. So with that in mind, I thought Tears of the Kingdom would be similar, and it was. It actually maybe was a bit too similar. It was the same as before. You go to each major city that represents each race in Hyrule and solve their individual problems. I didn't mind this, and actually quite enjoyed seeing the dire situations they were all in, which sounds really dark now that I'm saying it, but it was cool all the same. Hearing each village theme, combined with how apocalyptic the settings were, really made it seem like the situation at hand was a lot more serious than with the Divine Beasts in Breath of the Wild. It felt like if you didn't solve the problem immediately, many lives would be lost, and you just couldn't take that risk. I also absolutely loved the dungeons. They were fun, and the motifs of the past champions and the Divine Beasts mixed in with the music were phenomenal. But that's all I have to say in terms of what stood out to me. What really bugged me was how the quests seemed to play out the exact same way each time. Solving puzzles in a big dungeon and fighting a boss at the end was to be expected, but it was pretty disappointing that it was wrapped up with a cutscene that was almost word for word the same as each stage. They would meet their ancestors and find out that they fought alongside Rauru to defeat Ganondorf, but ultimately failed in the end and promised to help Link in the future for the next attempt to stop him. I mean, just look at this.
But the monster's true purpose was to prevent you from obtaining that stone. My secret stone.
Demon King. Demon Secret stone.
So yeah, after like my second dungeon, I would just dissociate during the cutscene and wait until it was over to get back to the fun stuff. But that wasn't the case with the story surrounding the Light Dragon. The Light Dragon can be seen drifting along the clouds of Hyrule skies, being the only dragon that doesn't disappear off into the depths. The first time you officially see it, however, is at the very beginning of the game, when you take your first plummet and the game's title appears. Off in the distance, you see this dragon gently floating across the screen until you focus your attention on diving towards the ground safely. The dragons were one of my favorite things back when I played Breath of the Wild. I was always filled with a sense of wonder when I saw one off in the horizons, or when I heard their theme softly roll in as one drifted closer to me from above. Each and every time, no matter how many times I see them, I would immediately stop what I was doing and watch them. There was something so ethereal about them that had me completely mystified. So when I saw the Light Dragon in the distance, I was instantly filled with that same emotion that I love so much. But what I didn't realize until much later in the game was that the dragon I saw during the opening scene wasn't one of the dragons I was familiar with. I initially thought that it was either Naydra or Dinral due to its light color scheme, but it was actually a brand new dragon that I'd never seen before. Apart from watching the dragon fly off into the distant sky like I usually would with the others, I didn't think too much of it. I thought it was a nice inclusion of one of the dragons to set up the new sky areas, that being closer to the dragon showed off the elevation of the new areas, but I was wrong. So wrong. There may have been times where I saw the Light Dragon in the distance while running around and still didn't recognize it, but the first time I fully saw it was when I was fighting Miragia. That was when I was able to truly get a good look at it and realize it wasn't one of the original 3 dragons. Despite fighting for my life at that moment, I still wanted to stand and stare at it like the other dragons. Dodging fireball after fireball, I was filled with even more wonder than I would be looking at the dragon, as it was like seeing one for the first time in Breath of the Wild. Fortunately, I had to eventually turn my attention away from it to focus on the matter at hand, where the light dragon would be gone from sight by the time I was done. I was still mystified though, so once I wrapped up the Goron City quest, I went out to specifically search for this foreign dragon. Because the dragons were on a set route that lined up rather perfectly to the in-game time in Breath of the Wild, I took note of the time I saw it around Death Mountain and waited. And waited. And waited. As you can imagine, I didn't find the light dragon. Not surprisingly, the dragon routes work drastically different in Tears of the Kingdom, but during the time I was playing, it was too early for guides online to show me the exact loop, so after a few more tries, I begrudgingly decided to move on. However, as I was continuing my exploration, I was also collecting the dragon tears that showed me a glimpse of Zelda's time in the past. Since I was around the Elden region, I found the Master Sword-shaped memory on the edge of the map right after, and this was where everything was beginning to piece together rapidly. By this time, I'd only collected about half of the memories, and they were all extremely out of order, but for the most part, the ones I found earlier showed the first half of the story. However, this specific cutscene details the tail end of the story, where Zelda took the broken Master Sword from Link at the beginning of the game. I didn't think much of it until there was a flashback to Minerva's words to Zelda.
To become an immortal dragon is to lose oneself.
I'll be forever changed. Link! You must find me.
From that single sentence, it didn't take long to connect everything, especially considering the lore behind the original dragons and how they're personifications of the three goddesses. It wouldn't be too hard to imagine Zelda becoming the light dragon, but it was too soon to assume. I had to find out more to make sure. At least, that's what my denial was telling me. After waiting a bit more to see if the dragon was going to appear again, I resumed my journey by heading towards the Lost Forest, as it was the next place I wanted to visit. After fighting for my life once again, God, I hate those hands, I finally received the exact location on where to find the Master Sword. Finding the Master Sword was always something that was on my checklist of things to do, not only because it's an unbreakable weapon, but also for the sake of completing the full story. But what I wasn't expecting was for the sword's location to be moving. This only added to my suspicions, but I immediately set off to find the Master Sword to confirm them. Luckily, the moving landmark was close to a sky island I had unlocked earlier, so once I teleported over, I could see the one and only light dragon floating off into the distance. At this point, I was beginning to really believe my theory, and it all came together once I got closer and closer to the dragon, enough so I could hear the music begin to settle in. I already described how, when a dragon flies near you, a certain theme starts to play when you get closer to it. I was expecting the same song to play when I inched towards the light dragon, and for a few moments, I thought that was the case. The first few seconds are exactly the same, with the choir harmonizing with the gentle piano keys, but then the melody begins to slow down. I began to wonder if this dragon had a special remix of the theme until I heard the next couple of notes. It was Zelda's lullaby. For comparison, here's what Zelda's lullaby normally sounds like compared to this track. Hearing that while gliding towards the light dragon was all that I needed to know for sure that it was Zelda. I didn't need to fully obtain the Master Sword or anything, I just knew from the music, and it was heartbreaking. When listening to this theme and hearing how Zelda's lullaby gets mixed in with the dragon's theme, you get the sense that it's as if Zelda is trying to remember herself, that her human self, her soul, is still in there somewhere. But as it fades back into the dragon theme, she simply can't recall her past self. It's like when you get a whiff of a scent that reminds you of your childhood, but just as soon as you smell it and recognize it, it disappears into the wind. No matter how hard you try to find that source of the scent, you just can't find it. It's a lost memory that you can't ever get back. And now you're in a situation where you know the Light Dragon is Zelda, but Zelda herself has been long gone. And this is exactly why this reveal struck me so much. Throughout the entirety of the game, you are given the task of finding Zelda, but little did we know, she was flying above us in the skies this whole entire time. But the task was never truly about finding Zelda. When she told Link to come find her, it wasn't just to bring her back to the present, but rather to retrieve the Master Sword, the only weapon that could stop Ganondorf. Zelda was only using herself to repair the sword for Link to use it. She knew, by the time that Link would find her again, she would no longer be there. She traded her humanity for the sake of her kingdom. It is the ultimate sacrifice. Alternatively, if this track is viewed from Link's or the player's perspective, those bits of Zelda's lullaby can give you a bit of hope. Zelda may have given up her life in order to save her people, but hearing her theme mixed in makes it seem like there's still a sliver of her still in there, just enough that you can someday save. Wherever the case may be, each take leads you onto the path that only leads towards the future, the one that Zelda gave up her entire being for. And that's what makes this bit of the story so special to me. No matter how you approach it, each player will find out the truth in their own individual ways, much like the rest of the game. Everyone will discover things at their own pace in different ways, which means that the reveal will hit them in equally different ways, but the signs are all still there. The Light Dragon will always appear when the title fades from the screen, and it will always fly high in the skies, even if you choose not to chase it down or retrieve all the memories. And that's not even the first time the Light Dragon is hinted at. In reality, it was there all along ever since the very beginning of the game, where you're walking through the caverns beneath Hyrule Castle with Zelda and see the Zonai mural. While you can't uncover the rest of the mural until later on in the game, when you are able to, it hits you all the same. For me, I was only able to see all of it right before fighting Ganondorf for the first time. By this point, I had collected all the memories and knew exactly what happened to Zelda, but to see that the answers to everything was there all along from the very start blew my mind. And while this little hint can be skipped like everything else, it's designed in a way that entices the player to break the rocks to see what's beneath, revealing everything to them. It was all an inevitable loop, an Ouroboros. There was never a true way to save Zelda. It all had to happen. It begins with Link failing to catch Zelda, and it ends with Link finally being able to reach her. I know 2 months doesn't sound very long, but I'm not lying when I say that the Light Dragon's reveal has had me in an iron grasp this whole entire time. Sometimes, when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, I just think about how amazing it felt to piece everything together while playing Tears of the Kingdom and just kick my legs while gripping my forehead. All of it was just so perfect! All the foreshadowing and the symbolism and god, the music! It's mind-blowing how the entire story could be illustrated just through Zelda's lullaby. As the melody is broken and lost in the Light Dragon's theme, but it finally breaks free and you can hear the entire song once Link is reaching out to catch her, just moments away from finally reuniting with her. It was so wonderfully crafted and I don't think I'll ever be able to get over it. I mean, I made this video just so I could talk about it, and even now, as I'm writing this, I struggle to fully explain my feelings. I guess to wrap up this gigantic ramble, I'll say one thing and one thing only. Tears of the Kingdom better win Best Game of the Year. Do not let me down, Jeff Cayley.